a number of high-profile individuals would be facing grand jury indictments based on this information. Now, it goes back to the rule of law. If we don't have a rule of law in place that's similar, fair, across the board for everybody, as opposed to what it is and has been, the have and the have-nots, the haves being the globalists and the have-nots being the rest of us, 99% of us, if we don't go back to that, the country's shot. It's over.
Gold and silver markets moved sideways to slightly down this Thanksgiving week. The gold spot price looks to be closing around $1,225 per troy ounce. Silver is likely going to end the week down a dime per ounce, closing near a $14.35 silver spot price level. This week's guest is an outspoken political analyst. His insights and contacts in the political sphere should give us listeners a deeper understanding of what is at stake with the Trump administration closing this year and moving into 2019. While we often do not focus on politics on this channel, U.S. economic policy stemming from the executive branch of the U.S. federal government often has direct ramifications on both the broad financial and precious metal markets. Pericles, a Greek statesman from 5th century BC, is attributed with having said the following: "Just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you." And also he said, "Freedom is the sure possession of those alone who have the courage to defend it." Before we get into our discussion with this week's guest, a friendly reminder to our listeners that our sponsor, SD Bullion, is throwing a big Black Friday sale on various precious metal bullion products for holiday shoppers. Constitutional silver coin buyers can also qualify for the chance to win a 1-ounce American Gold Eagle coin or various other silver bullion product prizes. Visit sdbullion.com for more information on this current Black Friday and Cyber Monday sale to come. And finally, unlike the following Perth Mint free silver coin offer about to end, we will be right back.
SD Bullion and Australia's famed Perth Mint are offering silver investors a free 2019 Perth Mint Silver Kangaroo coin. Only while supplies last. When you purchase 24 brand new Perth Mint Silver Kangaroo coins, you'll receive the 25th silver coin for free. These 2019 silver bullion coins will come officially sealed and delivered in protective Perth Mint tubes. Visit sdbullion.com/free to claim this limited time offer.
Welcome to this week's Metals and Markets Wrap. I'm your host, James Anderson of SD Bullion. This interview is being recorded at 11 a.m. Eastern on November 21st, 2018. With us this week is a new guest to the show. He is Dr. Dave Janda of DaveJanda.com, a recently retired orthopedic surgeon, author of The Awakening of a Surgeon book, and host of Ann Arbor, Michigan's weekly radio program called the Operation Freedom Radio Show. Dave, it's a pleasure to have you on our show.
James, it's an honor to be with you. Thank you very much. I enjoy all the work that you do through your platform at Silver Doctors and SD Bullion.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So, Dave, you've been, as far as back as I can remember, you've been back, on the internet talking about various things from economic situations ongoing, political and such. It seems like you have a lot of expertise in politics. I want to ask you just to start, to introduce yourself to the listeners. What is it that you do, and more importantly, why do you do it?
Well, there are days I ask myself that same question, James. As you mentioned, I was an orthopedic surgeon. I was an orthopedic surgeon for 27 years, retired January 1st, 2017. The date of my retirement is important in the sense that that's when many of the onerous aspects of Obamacare kicked in, with the electronic medical records that were automatically shipped to the government. And unbeknownst to patients, I was not going to be a part of that, and I stepped away. Now, in addition to my work as an orthopedic surgeon for 27 years, I've also, over that same time period, worked in healthcare policy. In addition to being an orthopedic surgeon, my focus was on the prevention side of the equation, when it came to research. So trying to prevent people from getting injured and then looking at the economic ramifications. Just one of our studies, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, has led to the prevention of about 1.7 million people from being injured every year and saved $2 billion in healthcare costs every year. At the time, some of our work in prevention actually got the attention of then President Ronald Reagan back in 1988, toward the end of his term, second term. He asked me to come to Washington and work with C. Everett Koop on healthcare policy. And myself and Koop and several congressmen, including Jack Kemp, who helped with healthcare policy with President Reagan, focused on trying to make the healthcare system more available, more affordable, and more quality-oriented. And many of the potential solutions we came up with in 1988, Reagan supported, but it was toward the end of his presidency, and it got shoved to the back burner with George Bush the first, Clinton, George Bush the second, and forget Obama. This was not a globalist approach to healthcare.
Right.
It was an approach of more for free markets, health savings accounts, insurance companies competing rather than colluding, selling insurance across state lines, generic drugs, going after big pharmaceutical companies. Pre-existing conditions would fall by the wayside because of these high-risk pools that we had suggested be created. The frustrating thing, James, is what we were talking about in 1988. Many people now are talking about as being the potential solutions to the problem in 2018, 30 years ago. Yeah. And the reason why they never came to fruition, and I could be very diplomatic, but as you know, I'm not a diplomat, it's because of big money, big medicine, read that AMA, big pharmaceuticals, big insurance, and big government all suppress these innovative approaches, and this is why we're in the mess we are today. I started working in healthcare policy in 88, as I mentioned, and over time, I was asked to consult in a number of different departments on healthcare issues, whether it was the Department of Treasury, and through that I got to meet people in the Secret Service, the Department of Health and Human Services, of course, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, the Treasury. And I developed this network of people. And very early on, James, I realized, and Reagan, one of the first things he actually taught me was there's really one political party. And I call it the Republicrats. And this right-left dichotomy is all about theater. It's all about having people at each other's throats so people don't realize what's really going on behind the curtain. Right. And back then, we defined it, if you will, as the deep state. That's just coming out now about the deep state and the shadow government. But it was very obvious that there was a group of people, very, very influential people, that worked the up-down axis, up being freedom, down being oppression, and their goal was to strip as much freedom from every American, every person in the world for that matter, and oppress as many people, and use the right-left axis as a false axis to divide and conquer the masses, to keep them distracted over what they were really working on. I came to realize that there were many people, there are many, many good people in the government, in every department. And there's a group of people that are focused on freedom, and there are a group of folks that are more globalist in nature. The globalists had control of the system for many, many decades. I actually took it back to as far as 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve and the like. Many people actually take it all the way back to the 1860s with the Civil War. Bottom line is it became very obvious that there was this group of people behind the curtain that was calling the shots. And that the people in front of the curtain, the, quote, politicians of the world, were nothing but puppets of this syndicate behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. And this is what I have tried to expose and discuss and present over all the years. And I've used my platform in medicine, in prevention, in our research that got a lot of national and international attention to kind of bring into the scope as far as what's really happening, not just in healthcare, but what's really happening to people's freedoms and liberties across the board. Mm-hmm. And as I said, this started in 88. Back in 2010, I started Operation Freedom, the radio show, which as you mentioned, broadcasts every Sunday. Folks can listen to it live, free. If they go to my website, davejanda.com, hit the upper right corner, they can listen live stream it 2 to 5. And on that show, I brought many of the people, many of the contacts that I had developed over the past 30 years to come forward. Mm-hmm. And these are people you're not going to see in the bought-off lamestream fake media. And that also includes Fox. Okay, many people believe Fox is fair and balanced at the other side of the coin. No. Let's go in the Baskin-Robbins ice cream store. They're all different types of flavors. Fox is one of those flavors, the globalist ice cream store. All right. So many people believe, they're fine and everybody else is a part of the problem. No. They're all part of the problem. Yeah. And this is where the alternative media has made a huge inroad and impact on people's knowledge base as far as what's really, really occurring. I started the radio show in October of 2010, 8 years ago, and we've now built that into an entire platform at davejanda.com. We have our YouTube channel, Operation Freedom. The names are important because there's some people that have ripped us off, taken our videos. So YouTube channel, Operation Freedom, davejanda.com. We have a public side where we have a lot of information we upload, and in a subscription side, which is 30 cents a day, where we have three extra shows a week, and they can always get the podcast 24/7. But we've developed this platform. Now, I must say, it has angered players within the deep state, because the people we bring forward are people that are speaking about what's really occurring and how the deep state is truly trying to dismantle, and has actually been fairly successful. We have to give them credit. They're our enemy, but they've been a successful enemy. Dismantle folks' freedoms and liberties and choices. And in fact, in many respects, have enslaved every American to this deep state system. And this is where the election of 2016 comes in. And, love or hate Donald Trump, my impression is the following based on my contacts providing me information, the contacts that I trusted and trust over the past 30 years. Is Trump is he a perfect guy? Not in any respect. No. And I think he'll probably be one of the first people to admit that. He has his issues. Right. And there are many things Donald Trump does that I disagree with, and what he says, some things he says. However, this is what I've learned from my contacts about Trump. There's the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis of globalists that have been so detrimental to our financial system, that have been so detrimental, if you will, to the precious metals world. Sure. The pure manipulation, right? Mm-hmm. And they've been detrimental to every person's freedom and liberty. There are different sets of globalists, silos, if you will. Right. And Trump appears to be aligned with a different silo in the globalist syndicate, a silo that's more about freedom, more about not the destruction of sovereign borders, not the destruction of sovereign entities like the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis, of which puppets of the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis, I believe, are the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, the Ryans, the Romneys, the McCains, the Pelosi's, the Schumers, all the household political names. You could pretty much put them in the silo of being middle-level puppets, including George Soros, of the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis. And then there's this other group and there's a number of silos, but this other silo that has come into power is the one of which Trump is kind of the most visible figure. And this silo is about reestablishment of, yes, make America great again, but also making sovereign countries sovereign again. Mm-hmm. Sure. And this is where we get into this nationalist discussion. Trump says I'm a nationalist, and you'll always tell who a globalist is, who's owned by the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis, because they'll come forward and they'll say, "Well, you're about white nationalism." No, nationalism, and Macron just went after Trump. And by the way, Macron's background, right? Mm-hmm. He was a former banker, and who did he work for? The Rothschilds. Yeah. Oh, okay. But just go back to another French leader, de Gaulle. Here's what de Gaulle said about nationalism. Quote, "He who does not love his mother more than other mothers, and his country more than other countries, loves neither his mother nor his country."
Yeah, de Gaulle was no joke. That guy was a real leader. I mean,
and he was a nationalist in a sense that he wasn't a racist. Right. That's what they try to paint you. He wasn't a racist. He wasn't a xenophobe. He wasn't look, being a nationalist means you are looking for the interests of your people, your citizens, your country. You're putting them foremost at the front part of the speech. That doesn't mean you declare war on the rest of the world. That doesn't mean if you and this is how the globalists want everybody to see the world.
Right.
and this is no matter what the issue, that it's all a zero-sum game. If you do well, everybody else loses.
Yeah.
Because the free market approach, a nationalist approach, is, look, if we do better, we lift the entire boat up. Right? So when folks come down on Trump as being a nationalist, I don't think that's fair.
Right.
Just because he might be looking out for the interests of Americans and America, United States of America, does not mean that it excludes the rest of the world. Right. But this is the globalist picture, and their tentacle, the main bought-off lamestream fake media, wants you wants to propagandize.
Sure.
So politically, we are in a situation where I believe we're in a civil war. Now, this civil war has been brewing behind the curtain for decades.
Right.
It has now come to the forefront starting in 2016. And I believe it's only going to get more visible, more overt, because as the globalist syndicate loses their control base, you are going to see them acting even more hysterically. You're going to see them acting out more.
Right.
And unfortunately, when you deal with globalists, and if you look at their track record, the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis, one of the cards in their business model focuses on chaos. The big chaos cards they play are financial destruction associated with war.
Yeah.
And I believe these are the cards the globalists want to play and are going to push to play to try to diffuse this nationalism that we see rearing its head, where people are saying, no, wait a minute, let's look out for our interests.
Right.
And I believe that many of the attacks we're seeing, such as the fake Russian dossier, which was bought and paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC, it was used to, I believe, illegally obtain surveillance warrants on members of Trump's team and Trump himself as a means of an insurance policy of taking down a duly elected president that was not a globalist.
Right.
Okay, so does Trump have globalist ties? Yes. Are they in the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis? I believe not.
Okay.
Are they tied to the globalist system that wants more harmony around the world and more sovereign entities being in place and each sovereign entity doing well on its own and lifting the whole boat? Yeah, I believe that's the part of the syndicate he's associated with.
So it essentially boils down to you are a free marketer. You're someone who believes not in crony capitalism, but in true capitalism. And people looking out for themselves and their national interests, that lifts all boats in general, as long as people are cooperating peacefully.
Absolutely. And I believe that capitalism has been infiltrated, if you will, by the globalists to create not free market capitalism, but crony capitalism, as you mentioned, which I believe is a tentacle of the globalist syndicate, if you will, the melding of big government with big business,
yes.
Right? Which really, my mom, the history teacher, used to teach me about systems very early in life. And, she said, when you have big government melding with big business, the name of that, Dave, is fascism.
Right. That's Italy.
Right. And that's right. Good old Mussolini, who, by the way, he's one of the fair-haired children, if you will, of the globalist syndicate.
Yeah, he's one of the biggest genocidal people of World War II. Correct. And I believe the vast majority of these genocidal maniacs that have been created around the world actually have ties into the globalist syndicate. Yeah.
There's evidence that Hitler and Mussolini and actually the communist movement, when the Tsar was knocked off in Russia, were all funded and supported through the criminal international banking syndicate led by that Rothschild-Rockefeller axis.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. A lot of it comes from Britain, the colonization, the methodology. It still exists today, the various tactics that are utilized. Order out of chaos, the Hegelian dialect, give two false choices, and ultimately you get what you're after, your policy, whether that be a globalist policy, what have you. Central control is the key. And
here's the thing, James. The discussion you and I are having, many people would look at this and go, for example, right outside this window in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor.
Right.
Okay. They would say, this is conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
No. You see, that's a label used, if you will, to marginalize people that are being analytical.
Right.
It might be conspiracy, but it's conspiracy fact.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. If you've done your research, at least in a little bit, if you haven't done your research, it's easy to write that off and just walk away and say, I'll go back to MSNBC or Fox News and they'll tell me what's going on. But if you dig deeper, like your mother taught you, right? If you go into the details of what the other side of the story may be, you'll start to find things that you weren't told. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have to start digging holes in a lot of places to learn what really happened or what really is going on.
Yeah, and I just uploaded a YouTube on this about Thanksgiving. The lesson my mom taught me as a first grader. What that lesson was about, long story short,
Sure.
Socialism versus free market capitalism.
Yeah.
When Plymouth Colony was founded in the 1620s, it was on a socialistic model. This is what caused all the death, destruction, and almost the annihilation of that colony until William Bradford, the governor, instituted a free market capitalist approach to take the place of that social, which is when the real Thanksgiving occurred, which is when prosperity, famine went away, prosperity flourished.
Right.
You see, and this is the lesson that we're not taught in school. We're not taught this in our history books, or you're not going to get this off the bought off mainstream fake media's propaganda circuit, whatever channel you're watching.
You're not even going to give it if you're a business student at a business school. You're going to get taught some gobbledygook Keynesian economic theory and limited history of what really went down in this country as far as money.
Well, one of my majors, I was a double major in college, chemistry and economics. One of my majors was in economics. Mm-hmm. The economics department, where I went to college, Bucknell University, had one free market capitalist in it.
Right.
Everyone else was defined as being, quote, market socialists.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Okay? Right? Or communists.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing, James, is it gave me a background of understanding their systems even more in depth. Mm-hmm. And by doing that and essentially dissecting these systems and having these ideologues trying to teach us about how great these systems were, it became very obvious what the flaws of the system were. Mm-hmm. And the underlying flaw with all those systems is the fact that people's freedoms were just decimated.
Right. And above all else, that's the most important thing.
And that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have your freedom or your liberty, you have nothing.
Yeah. That's the most important thing above all else. And that first and foremost, that you have your sovereignty.
And that used to drive my professors nuts when I used to raise my hand and say, this is all well and fine, but where does freedom come into the model here?
That's too big a question.
No, and that was the question, James. It got me in a lot of trouble. Now, understand something. If I would have done that back then, they would get them mad and they get frustrated, but they wouldn't penalize me.
Yeah.
Today, if I go down the street to the University of Michigan and I walk through everybody's safe spaces, okay, and walk into a classroom, and they do still teach this exactly, and I raise my hand and go, exactly where does freedom come? James, I would be asked to leave the classroom.
Right.
I would be reported to the dean's office for being malicious and harming people's thought processes that they couldn't handle this, right? And I might even get thrown out of school.
Yeah, you'd certainly be blackballed and whispered about. That's for sure.
And the gold GPA would be going right down the tubes too. At least back then, they didn't penalize you in that regard.
Right.
But that's the difference, I think, James, between when I was growing up and today. Right now, there is such censorship. If you are, and I consider myself a libertarian. A free market libertarian, if you will, if you're going to put a label on it. Mm-hmm. And you and I spoke before we came on today about the censorship that occurs with such platforms as, we see this in YouTube.
Sure.
Right? So like with my platform, it's not monetized. Mm-hmm. And we applied months ago, haven't gotten it. Why? Well, because they don't want to fund somebody that's putting out information that's not globalist in nature. Mm-hmm. Yet YouTube allows channels to steal my original content, put it up on their channels, and they're monetized.
Right.
because those channels are associated with the globalist side of the equation. And this is part of this civil war we're speaking about.
Right.
Now, the good news, as far as I'm concerned, and I think you're concerned, is that I think freedom's going to win out.
Yeah, I think ideas are much more powerful than some, large company that rises and eventually falls, because they all eventually do. But in the end, it's ideas. They're bulletproof, and if you keep passing them along, people will seek that and they'll find it. And if it really rings true and it's something that can help people prosper, I don't think it'll stop.
And there is a subset of people that like to be controlled.
Yeah.
Because life is easier that way because you don't have to make any decisions.
Yeah, people like to be told what to think.
Right. But there's a bigger subset of people that don't want to be controlled.
Right.
And I think that's where we are today.
Yeah.
And this is why what you do through your channel, what we do, what you do through Silver Doctors, this is and what you do through SD Bullion in providing a means of folks to have their financial freedom in place. This is why the globalists, although they love to accumulate precious metals themselves, this is why they love to tell us useless eaters, as they refer to us as. And I've been in meetings in big white buildings in Washington, D.C., where that term has been used.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Okay? So this is not just some conspiracy thing about, the globalists see everybody, the unwashed is used. No. That's how no. They call us useless eaters. And I can tell you at some of those meetings in Washington, the first several meetings, I say, who's that guy in the corner? And you know who it invariably was? Somebody associated, either a Rockefeller or somebody associated with the Rockefellers. Never just taking notes.
Yeah.
Right? And these folks are impregnated into the system, and they're there and they're monitoring what's going on.
Sure.
And this is why what you do with SD Bullion, what we try to do with Operation Freedom, we try to do with DaveJana.com, I think is important because it gives people another avenue of information. And what you do with SD Bullion is important because, as I mentioned, you give people their financial freedom because the globalists don't want us useless eaters to have real money.
Yeah, they don't want you to have...
They don't want that. They don't want it.
They don't want you having something they can't control. And precious metals in a physical form are very difficult to control or track and trace. So they don't like that.
And when their financial chaos hits in, if you have gold and silver, you have a foundational bedrock of financial support if you have physical gold and silver. Just ask the people in Venezuela or Iran or Greece. Right. But if you have their paper currency that has ink on it and is not backed by anything, they got you right where they want.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. Dependent, that's how they want you.
Yes, so they want you dependent.
Let's swing it back to present time. I want to hear, it's been 2 years almost now that Trump's been in office. I want to hear how you think he's doing, and then maybe a little bit about the recent election, if you can give us a little bit of your analysis on it.
Well, a couple things. With Trump, it's amazing he's gotten anything done because the globalists have been mashing on him with this fake Russian collusion deal and trying to remove him from office. He's had the deep state coming after him on so many different fronts. So he's had a lot on his plate. Mm-hmm. I think he has done some good things in a sense that he's, if you look at him getting rid of TPP, right? He had pulled us out of NAFTA. Mm-hmm. Now this new agreement, in speaking to some people, has some parts of the old agreement in it, but it hasn't been finalized. So hopefully, a lot of times he gets part of the thing done and then finishes it off the rest of the way. I actually think our world is a safer place if you look at his peace initiatives with North Korea. Mm-hmm. I think if you look at terrorist activity across the world, it's diminished from what it was. Yeah. We see ISIS no longer on the radar screen when it was very prevalent during the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons, for your viewers, that General Mike Flynn, who I believe is a patriot and a hero, I believe that he will be exonerated. One of the reasons why the deep state wanted to get rid of General Flynn was because when General Flynn was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Flynn leaked the information that ISIS was weaponized, trained, funded through a number of governments, including the United States and Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Qatar and the UAE and even Israel.
Right. So it's basically an echo of Al-Qaeda, basically.
Right. So as you mentioned with the globalists, they create the enemy, then fight the enemy, and out of that chaos, they come up with more power, control, and more financial resources.
But they want to keep us safe, Dave. I mean, they got to create laws.
Right. So they want to keep, they keep themselves safe. The rest of us, well, just dango, right? But so with Trump, I think on a number of fronts, he's done better. I've been a bit frustrated on the healthcare issue. Now, understand something. That was undermined by Paul Ryan. Ryan Care, and I got in trouble by speaking about this, but Ryan Care, I believe, was nothing more than baby Obamacare. It was a gift to the insurance industry, which is what Obamacare was. Obamacare was written and supported by the health insurance industry. Let no one tell you any different. I've read it inside out, God knows how many times. I know the nuances.
Everyone's seen their bill. Yeah, it's gone up. I mean, it's obvious that was an inside job.
Look at right? Just look at your and also look at the stock prices of health insurance companies.
And
800%.
And the buildings, they keep growing and growing. I mean, come on, use your common sense.
Right. So I was a bit frustrated that Trump was backing Ryan Care, and then when that was starting to fall apart, then he said, okay, well, let's just get rid of the mandate here and mandate there. I believe Obamacare, based on people I know that are outstanding healthcare policy analysts, in conjunction with my experience in this, Obamacare could go away and a new system put in place within 24 hours. Okay? So all these people saying it'll take months, it'll take years, it'll take weeks, millions of people will die, that is nothing but propaganda.
Yeah, fear-mongering.
24 hours. So I've been a bit frustrated with Trump. But part of the reason he's been slow on this healthcare issue and this repeal and getting rid of Obamacare and putting something in its place that provides people more availability and affordability and more quality-oriented healthcare is because of Congress. Congress, and again, Paul Ryan, globalist, was the guy who was in charge of slowing that whole train down aimed at healthcare. And he did. He was very successful at that. I don't like him. I hope the door doesn't hit him in his butt on his way out the door, but if it does, all the better.
Yeah.
So I think the world's a safer place with Trump there. I think he's trying to build bridges and trying to create an environment where America is better. And I do believe that you have to have a secure border, not just on the southern border, but the northern border, and every border crossing, as Mike Cutler, the expert from immigration, tells us, every airport is a border.
Right. That's mainly how they get here.
That's right. So we have to make sure that our borders are secure, because if you don't have a secure border, you have chaos.
Right.
As far as the rule of law, and this is the key, I believe one of the first elements, foundational elements that globalists took out was our rule of law. And I believe Trump is in the process of trying to restore that. I think right now he has a 5-4 majority in the Supreme Court that are focused on the rule of law. And you can take all the stuff out with Kavanaugh. I believe what it came down to, Trump didn't ask him what his position on Roe versus Wade was, or this or that. I believe it was, all right, let's talk about the rule of law, and let's talk about who we are. And that was an issue. And you saw the biggest attacks on Kavanaugh come after that 5-minute interview with Lindsey Graham, asking him questions during his first confirmation hearing when they start to talk about military tribunals. Okay? And the fact that they are constitutional and could be implemented and utilized for acts of treason or sedition. And that was the bell ringing for the globalists, which is when all of a sudden we started to hear about Blasey Ford and all these other people coming forward. If you look at what they've happened in the Department of Justice and FBI, the sheriffs in town, if you will, there are 26 people that have either resigned, fired, or under investigation and have lost their positions in the FBI and the Department of Justice at a high level. This has never happened in our country's history. So I think Trump, when he got in there, said, One, we got to clean up the sheriff. We got to make the sheriff so that the sheriff isn't some dirty cop. We got to make sure the sheriff is Andy Griffith from Mayberry.
Right.
Okay. And that was the first. And then he looked at the judicial and said, okay, well, now that we got the sheriffs in town that are not playing for the globalists, now we got to clean up the judicial branch. So now he has a 5-4 majority in the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's been 53 new federal judges appointed at the district level, 29 at the appeals level.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think another 30 more that are scheduled to be approved here very quickly. So then that's the judicial side.
Mm-hmm.
And once the sheriff in town is more honest,
mm-hmm.
and you've got the judges you can count on going to the rule of law,
right.
not a left thing,
right.
but a rule of law thing, then and only then can you proceed forward. And if you look at what's happened recently in the Department of Justice, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions
mm-hmm.
resigned,
mm-hmm.
and Matt Whitaker has taken his place. If you look, many people say, well, what's the take on Whitaker? All you have to look at is who opposes him. Okay, the globalist outcry against Whitaker has been enormous.
Yeah.
Now, that alone doesn't make him the right guy for the job, but to me, it's an indicator. If they're screeching,
right.
that must mean that they can't trust him. Mm-hmm. And when they screech,
it's probably a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Right.
And what I believe, and I believe this comes down to, and I believe that we are at a window here,
mm-hmm.
James.
Mm-hmm.
We have another month, period. And if something big doesn't happen in this next month, I believe Trump is going to be in huge trouble, and I believe our country is going to be even bigger trouble. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that is because we saw what happened with the elections, and he beat the trend. Normally, existing power in place loses seats in the Senate. Mm-hmm. He gained a couple. Usually loses, if you look at Obama, I think his first term he lost 63 seats in the House. Clinton lost 52. I think Trump now, even with many of these races that were very sketchy in how they happened at the House level, such as in Orange County, California, where 300,000 more people voted for the House of Representatives race than they did in the own governor race.
Right.
That in and of itself is an indication of rampant voter fraud. And the Los Angeles Times just came out with an article yesterday talking about the rampant voter fraud on behalf of Democrats, of how they were soliciting hundreds, thousands of votes illegally out of skid rows in the major metropolitan areas in California. Mm-hmm. And marching them in and filling out their ballots and all kinds of chicanery mm-hmm. in order to get these wins. But I believe we have a month. And the big thing I believe I'm watching for, and I believe everyone should watch for, is what happens with this declassification issue. This is really important. Mm-hmm. This is what it all teeters on. On September 17th, Donald Trump came out and said, I want 3 things declassified and I want them unredacted. 1, the Fisa warrants on Carter Page. 2, the email communications between Comey and McCabe. Mm-hmm. And 3, the 302 forms. 302 forms are what the FBI fills out when they interview somebody. A Broussard, the number 4 guy in the Justice Department under Obama. Now, why are those 3 things important? Fisa warrants. It's my understanding from my contacts that I know and trust. The Fisa warrants, when they're declassified, will show that the first warrants for surveillance were solely based on the fake Russian dossier that was bought and paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Loretta Lynch, who was the Attorney General, never went to that court to get the initial warrants. She passed them on an emergency basis where they instituted them just on her signature in that first week, and then she went to the court, and the only evidence presented to a judge, not an entire court, a judge, was the fake Russian dossier. Mm-hmm. The text messages between McCabe and Comey, I am told, will show blatant sedition and treason. And the third entity, the 302 forms with Broussard, the number 4 in the Justice Department, will show collusion with the White House into the West Wing and the fact that it's reportedly the dossier, the fake Russian dossier, was written by this character Steele that had ties to British intelligence through a company by the name of Fusion GPS. In fact, it'll show the majority of that document was actually written by Bruce Orr. This is what I'm told. And that Steele edited and added some things, but a high-level Department of Justice official within the Obama White House and the Obama Justice Department with who was funneling information to the White House wrote that fake Russian dossier, which was used to try to remove a sitting president of the United States. This is a blatant, this makes Watergate the Tea Party. It really does. It's such an abuse of power, and it goes all the way to the Oval Office. And my contacts tell me that have had an opportunity to look at these documents, that a number of high-profile individuals would be facing grand jury indictments based on this information. Now, it goes back to the rule of law. If we don't have a rule of law in place that's similar, fair, across the board for everybody, as opposed to what it is and has been, the have and the have-nots, the haves being the globalists and the have-nots being the rest of us, 99% of us, if we don't go back to that, the country's shot. It's over. And it's been very frustrating because, as I mentioned, Trump put this directive out on September 17th. And here we are. You mentioned the date we're taping this, toward the end of November, and it still hasn't happened.
Yeah.
It has to happen.
Yeah.
And what I've been told is the reason why Sessions is no longer there. Sessions behind the curtain, as I have been told, many months had actually been working in a positive manner to lining up, working with this prosecutor out of Utah by the name of Huber. He's actually going to Capitol Hill on Monday or Tuesday, actually, of next week to testify, unfortunately behind closed doors. But he was responsible for lining up a number of these, and reportedly there are tens of thousands of sealed indictments.
Right.
That Sessions was behind the scenes lining all this up. But at the very end, Sessions was to declassify, to release these documents, and rather than that, he started to slow walk them. And because he slowed walk them is the reason why his resignation. And does that make him a bad guy? No, it just makes you wonder, why did he start to slow walk it?
Yeah.
Was he compromised? Did he just not have the fire in his belly to get it done? Or was the plan all along to have him take it to a certain point and then have, kind of like a baseball analogy, him being the starter, and then to have a closer come in that is very comfortable throwing high and tight underneath the chin at 95 miles an hour to get people to back off the plate.
Right.
And that's what Matt Whitaker is, and this is why the globalists and their little puppets have been so out of control screaming about who Matt Whitaker is and what's he doing.
So they've been shrieking a lot about Matt Whitaker, and I've been a little bit out of the news cycle, but just flipping through the channels the other night, I saw the shrieks going on, and so it doesn't surprise me. Your analysis, it'll be very, very interesting in the next month or two. What do you think? Obviously it's dark days ahead if that doesn't happen, if nothing occurs. Do you think we'll go to a situation where the Democrats will try and get Trump out? Will they try and do some type of scandal where they impeach him somehow?
I think they'll come after I think unless he puts them on their heels and actually gets this declassification information out, I think what you're going to look at are them screaming about impeachment, them trying to uncover any financial dealings he had in the past. They're going to throw a lot of sand up in the air. I think you're going to see the globalist syndicate probably mobilize some type of conflict or conflicts around the world. I also believe that I do believe that that our financial system is beyond wobbling at this point.
Sure.
And I think you're going to see I'm not sure it can be prevented at all, the financial aspect.
Yeah.
I think many of these other issues, if he could set them on their heels with this declassification.
Right.
But I do believe that the financial, if you want to call it reset, that is, I believe, in the cards, I don't think that can be prevented in any shape or form. And I think Trump is telling you that.
Yeah.
Look, when he was running, and this is one of many people's frustrations, including mine, when he was running for the office of president, he was saying, look, the system's a fraud, okay? The markets are a fraud. They're pumped up by the central banks that are owned by the globalists. The labor statistics, the data coming out of the government it's fraud.
Right.
Comes president, and all of a sudden he starts saying, well, the market's going up. That's because of me. Right? Everything's fine. Okay, everything's going good.
Sure.
Here's what I think happened, James, and this is from some people on the inside who I trust very much. Trump knew that we were $21 trillion in debt. He realized we had a big, and then on all the unfunded liabilities,
Sure.
he realized that coming in. But if you remember, he had a meeting with Obama. And right after the meeting, they had a photo op session in the Oval Office. Both of them looked very, very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. And Trump seemed very upset. So it's my understanding what happened is he was actually given information about the real state of affairs. And I think he had a plan going into that meeting right after he was elected. Okay, we're 21 trillion. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to grow out of it. We're going to make America great again. We're going to bring manufacturing back. We're going to cut regulations. We're going to cut business tax. We're going to make companies prosper, pushing stuff out, employing more people, build the economy. That's part of it, but that's not going to do all of it. So we're also going to have to inflate away
the value of the dollar, sure.
The value
so you
of the
can
dollar,
export,
right? And we might even have to default
external debt,
not all of our debt.
Yep.
And remember, when Puerto Rico got hit and they ran into a default situation, what was his response? Default. And I believe Trump is there for a reason. Look, he knows bankruptcy law.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and the bottom line is, you look at the books of the United States of America, and we're bankrupt.
Yeah.
And I can't think actually of a better person to handle a bankruptcy than Trump, because let's face it, when he got through his bankruptcies, he was a whole lot better off at the end than he was at the beginning, and very few people can do that.
Right.
So I believe he had a plan for the economy of our country and the financial stability and how we could get out of this. I think at that meeting, he realized, oh God, oh dear. And I think one of the things he was confronted with, and this is something we've talked about on my show with Dr. Mark Skidmore from Michigan State University, and Catherine Austin Fitts, was former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under Bush 1. Between 1998 and 2015, so 17 years, there's 21 trillion with a T dollars that are missing from just the Department of Defense and Housing and Urban Development. And that, I believe, is the tip of the iceberg, because that's just 17 years, and that's just
what they've documented.
That's departments, right?
Yeah.
So I believe he was confronted with this extra 21 trillion, in addition to your 21 trillion you're in debt, and God knows how many more trillion. And I believe he realized, oh my God, I just took over the Titanic and it's already hit the iceberg and we're half underwater. And I believe that's why he was so unsettled at that meeting. So I believe, and many people say, well, Trump has associated himself with these globalists, Mnuchin, Wilbur Ross, Gary Cohen that he had in there. Yeah, and I believe what he did is he had them as essential hostages. Okay? I think he brought these globalists in and said, okay, boys, you put this ship into the iceberg, but guess what? You're not getting in any lifeboat. Oh, no. You, Mnuchin, who's associated with Goldman Sachs and still affiliated, and Cohen associated with Goldman. Wilbur, with all your guess what? You boys are here with me, okay? And you know what? We're going to find a way to get everybody into a lifeboat. And you might not like it, but that's what's going to happen. I think that's what that was about, having these guys, because they all knew how the system was rigged.
Right.
They all knew, and they essentially became informants.
Yeah. It's like if you wanted to protect against criminals, you'd hire a criminal because they think just like those criminals, right? I mean, it's essentially what you do.
One of the people I just interviewed for my platform, DaveJanda.com, was Jimmy Boots Rostan, the most famous detective in NYPD history. His biggest informants were the biggest kingpins in the criminal element.
And they were the ones who gave him all the information because they felt that underneath it all, he was going to clean out a lot of the system.
Mm-hmm. Or at least their competition.
That's right. That's right. At least the competition. So I believe it's a similar situation here. And now what do we have Trump doing? Now we have Trump, and this is the only person in my life, two people in my lifetime that ever pointed the finger at the Fed and said bad and trouble was John Kennedy. Yeah. We're coming up on the 55th anniversary. What happened to him?
Yep.
Yeah, good old trip in Dallas. And Ronald Reagan. We know Ronald Reagan was March 30th, I believe.
Yeah.
2 months he was inaugurated.
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
Yeah, he got shot, right?
Shot, right? So the two guys that have spoken against the Federal Reserve have had some
issues.
And the third in my lifetime was Trump. And what's he saying? He's pointing at the Fed. And he's saying, they're the problem. They're the enemy. Mm-hmm. They're the enemy. They're the problem. Even Reagan didn't go that far. And Trump is. And I believe he knows the system is beyond teetering. And the system is on its last legs. And he wants to make sure that when the system comes down, people know who the problem is.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting question because he obviously has a very rabid base of followers who understand, I think, his general impetus. The other question is, if this does happen, where we have a rollover in the stock market, will his ability to communicate that message be stronger and louder than the standard financial media that will, there's a lot of them versus him, right? Who's going to have the sway? Who's going to be able to win in that argument?
Well, historically, I will tell you the bad guys.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you look at how he's gone around the media, the fake media, through Twitter, through social media, mm-hmm. the reason why they act this way, these press conferences that are goat rodeos of the highest order,
right.
The reason why they're so confrontational and so crazed is because they're not coming at it from a position of power, James.
Right, they're coming from weakness. Yeah.
They see they're losing.
Yeah.
They're losing. And they're lashing out at him.
Yeah.
And all it does when they do this is create more converts. People say, I don't like Trump. I think he's arrogant. But you know what? I don't like what these guys are doing.
Right.
Okay? I mean, I don't like this Acosta guy saying, I want to challenge you on this, and then karate chopping some White House female intern.
Right.
Okay? That doesn't play well in Peoria.
Right.
And it also doesn't play well in most cities in the United States.
Sure.
I mean, even outside that window.
Yeah, they wouldn't play well in Ann Arbor.
They hate to admit it.
Yeah.
But you know what? That doesn't play well.
Yeah.
So when the system starts to break down, the globalists will go in overdrive with their tentacles that they own in the bought-off lamestream fake media and try to pin this on Trump. But Trump is a much better communicator than all of them, I believe, combined. And he's already set the stage, and they know it, and it drives them nuts because he's been, for a month and a half, it's the Fed.
Yeah.
It's the Fed. It's the Fed. And now he's throwing in there. And notice the stock market's going down since the Dems cheated their way into winning the House of Representatives, right? Maxine Waters is going to run the financial committee. Well, that's one of the reasons why and he has the ability to drive this. And what he has that no other president has had is the rise of the alternative media. Mm-hmm. The alternative media is far more powerful today than it was in 2016.
Right.
And I believe that he has locked onto that. Mm-hmm. And my dad had some interactions with Trump 30 years ago. My dad built big buildings in the city of Chicago. And he had some interactions with Trump. And my mom was not a fan of Trump. And he was going to have these meetings with Trump. And she said, what are you going to meet with that guy? He's an egomaniac and blah, 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 blah. And this is 30 some years ago. And he goes, well, I'm going to have these meetings, blah, blah. Comes back from the meetings and he goes, he's far different in private than he is in person.
That doesn't surprise me.
He doesn't talk much in private. He listens. And he goes, here's the best part of Donald Trump. He goes, I provided him information that he needed to know, but it was not what he wanted to hear. It was bad news. And he goes, you know what? He didn't lash out. You know what he did? He goes, he asked me question after question after question. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. Tell me why that. Tell me that. And he goes, and at the end of our meeting, we had a solution to the problem. And my dad said the other thing. He surrounds himself with really bright, honest people. He goes, it's obvious with the interchange with the people, and they weren't afraid to pipe up, even though it might be contrary to what they think the boss wanted to hear. They put their input in also. And he said he has really good people around him. He goes, I get the distinct feeling around him, an impression that he's honest, he's really hardworking, and he listens. And my dad then had a number of other meetings with him, and his impression at the end of all of that was, what you're seeing in public is not what is there in private, and what you're seeing is more of a showman in public. But behind the scenes, he goes, you're dealing with somebody who loves information. He goes, most people want to say, cone that down. I only give me the bullet points.
Right.
This is the exact opposite. He wants details, and he wants as many details as he can get. And he goes, frankly, he goes, in the construction industry, that he goes, my experience is that's the sign of somebody who's going to be incredibly successful.
Yeah, you can't just do bullet points in construction. That will not work. And you can't go slow. You can't be bureaucratic.
And I can tell you, because my dad built buildings. Building a large building is a logistics nightmare. Yeah. And you have one little detail go wrong, and all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, and money goes out the window for sure.
So the fact that Trump could build not just 5 large buildings, but dozens and dozens of large buildings, that doesn't happen to somebody who's dumb, or isn't analytical, or isn't proactive in
or
their thought.
Isn't able to quickly judge someone and their character and get rid of them if they're not doing the job correctly. Yeah.
Right. And you know, he comes across sometimes as being off the cuff, just shooting his mouth off and not knowing. But here's the thing. He does that, and he'll say something. Remember when he said, Trump Tower's bugged? Oh, my gosh. The bought-off lamestream fake media went crazy.
Yeah, I remember that.
And did he just kept saying, it's bugged. I'm moving what we're doing to my golf course in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And this guy's paranoid. This guy's crazy. This guy, he's a lunatic. Yet he was 110% correct. And the reason why is because before he made that statement, he had all the data in front of him that showed, and he doesn't mind being chastised as being wrong in the short term, because he knows he has the inside information that ultimately is going to come out and prove him right. And he does this time and time again, and his enemies, his opposition, completely has him underestimated. And this is why I believe he's so confident that he can beat them.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously surprised the hell out of them in 2016, and it's been certainly very, very interesting to watch it. I've kind of kept my distance a little bit watching it. I haven't really forayed into it as much, but I've been watching your work and others out there. And my brother, one of them is totally. He thinks Trump has his heart in the right place. The other, just thinks he's terse and is a disgrace, et cetera, et cetera. So I've kind of tried to keep my wits about me and be very rational with the analysis. But I had a whole bunch of questions today, and we've talked for a grand bit. And I want to have you back on as soon as possible if I can, so we can cover more.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, more of the questions that we didn't get to, Dave. It's been really, really fun. I want to thank you for coming on the show this week, and I want you to tell listeners again how they may find your work and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, thank you very much, James, for all your efforts and for having me on your platform.
Mm-hmm.
So the radio show Operation Freedom is broadcast live every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern. It can be streamed at davejanda.com. They just go in the upper right-hand corner. It's free. We also have the YouTube channel, YouTube channel is called, like the radio show, Operation Freedom. There's some knockoffs. Operation Freedom is the only original content on that. And then we have the website, DaveJanda.com. Now, on DaveJanda.com, you can stream the show live free. We have a lot of free content on the site. We also have subscription content. The subscription content is 30 cents a day, $9 a month. Folks can sign up for a month. They don't like it, get rid of it. But the subscription content involves the podcasts from not just the past week's radio show so that people have 24/7 access to it, not just the live show, but for every show up until from its inception, October 2010. Our Insider Insight show, which is a video interview show that I do once a week of somebody from behind the curtain. My guest this coming week is Jimmy Boots Rothstein, the detective, NYPD detective. He touches on what Watergate was all about. He talks about how John Paul I was assassinated and why he was assassinated, because he was the guy who did the investigation. Wow. He talks about the Kennedy assassination. Jimmy actually was in the Bay of Pigs. Wow. About what all the Kennedy assassination was about and who was involved. So that's our Insider Insight show. Then we have I do a WTF show, which is a show I do about geopolitical issues and analysis based on from what my contacts are telling me. We have a Department of Advanced Research show hosted by Nick Ruiz on information technology. We have our contributing editors section for our contributors or for our subscribers, and a healthcare briefing section that I don't think exists anywhere. I know it doesn't exist anywhere else on the internet, and it's about how folks can cut their healthcare costs and how to empower themselves in their healthcare freedom. And that's what we have on our subscription. So we have the free side, the subscription side at DaveJanda.com. We have the YouTube channel, Operation Freedom, and, of course, the radio show on Sunday, Operation Freedom as well.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it so much that you came on the show, and I hope I can speak on your behalf and us as well at Silver Doctors and SD Bullion, and just wish everybody out there a happy Thanksgiving. And if you're not an American listener, maybe outside our country, we wish you the best as well. And thank you so much for tuning in this week.
Thank you.